One of the things that's nice about Unity Fellowship is the fact that no matter whether you're white, black, brown, purple, green, gay, straight, bi, trans, you're welcome here. You know, it's just the mindset of everybody here, include Pastor Bob all the way down. You know, everybody here. It's home, and you feel like you're going home. You feel like you're in a big accepting family when you're here.
So what makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. And I also feel like many churches focus on the individual, but we are actually meant to be in relationship with others. The concept of Ubuntu, that if one person is oppressed, that all people are oppressed. And I feel like Pastor Bob, in his sermons, he really focuses on systemic injustices and oppression, and that God is on the side of the oppressed.
Well, after many years of being out of the church, we came to a point where we were ready to find a church, but I in particular knew that I no longer wanted a part of what I had experienced as a younger person. My soul and spirit had just no longer aligned with what I was being taught about myself. So I left the church for many years, and then as a couple years later, we decided we wanted to return to a church. So a new part of that had to be a church that was totally accepting and not just welcome to come to the door, but could fully participate in all regard, should we desire. And so we began to visit churches, and we visited Unity Fellowship a while back, and felt like we had made a discovery in a church home.
And we also like this church because it's a teaching church. Every Sunday we have the opportunity after the service, or even sometimes during it, if we have questions and we're not sure of what he's talking about, or if we have questions as to the sermon that he's preaching, that we're allowed to do that. And that's something that I've never had in a church. And it's been very enlightening, and I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned about a lot of things, actually. And above and beyond anything else, I know that I'm loved. I know that Scott's loved, and I know that we're loved together.
And so it's not just like going to mass at a big church and you just go in, hear the thing, get up and leave. Here you actually are charged with asking yourself, what does it mean? And the membership is small enough we can all interact during the sermon as well as after the sermon. So we can ask each other questions. You learn from other people with their comments or their questions about whatever we're discussing that week, or what was discussed the week before, or whatever. And unlike a large church where you just know the people from sight, you actually know the people here. Whether they are active in doing something or they're just here every week and they participate in how are you doing and stuff like that. Or they tell you how somebody else that they've talked to that you haven't seen is doing. So it's like a very large, it's not just a church family, it's a large family.
Just because you came from a Baptist background or a Pentecostal background or a Catholic background doesn't mean you're not welcome. Unity will surprises a lot of people because everyone is accepted. You will feel comfortable. You won't feel out of place. You won't feel judged. You'll feel like you belong.
folks. This is Pastor Bob coming to you from Unity Fellowship. You may be really sick of church. You may have given up on church a long time ago, and maybe you're not even looking for a place. But I want to invite you to a faith community where you'll be safe, where you can be accepted for who you are. Always, for whoever you are right now on your faith journey. Check us out on Facebook Live. Check us out on Zoom. I think you'll find a place that you're safe, a place that you'll be accepted, a place that you'll feel comfortable.
What makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. This community, at its heart, is open to everyone, and even if you are on the fence and you might disagree, we are still open to having that dialogue and that discussion that fosters growth and understanding. So I feel like the people who come to Unity Fellowship are so open and loving that even if you didn't agree with something that the church promotes, that you're still able to express that and not be judged.
Good morning, everyone. We would like to welcome you to Unity Fellowship this morning, wherever you're tuning in from, if that be in person, Sanctuary, or if that be on Zoom, Facebook Live, or our website live feed. We really want you to understand that you're welcome. All of you, not just some of you. We welcome all of you, as we understand God welcomes all of you. We want to give love to everybody along their journey, whatever has brought you here this morning. And we ask that you interact with us in some way, whether that be through sharing your video on Zoom, partaking in the conversation that we'll have in the chats in both Facebook and or on Zoom, and really try to interact with us. That's how we create fellowship virtually. So it's important, if you can, to share your video. If you're on Facebook, let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know what's on your mind this morning. And above all, we are glad you're here. Bob?
Thank you, Pastor G. And let me reiterate what you just said. You are welcome, all of you, collectively, as well as all of you as a person. Your whole self is welcome and accepted and valued. So we want you to know that. We're glad that you have found us wherever in the world you may be and that you have joined us. I just got a message, by the way, that there's a problem, I think, with the Zoom coming up kind of empty. Some people are having some problems with the link today, I think. So let you all look at that and see what's going on. I do want to, this is the third Sunday of Lent, and today I want to begin with a video. If you go to the next slide, okay. Oh, no, sorry. Let's back that up a little bit. I forgot about our droplet of cloud of witnesses. The writer of Hebrews talks about a cloud of witnesses that surround us our ancestors, influencers, and fellow disciples who help us to run the race that is set before us. And so each Sunday this year, we've been highlighting one such saint that has helped us to run our race. We want to acknowledge our indebtedness to those guides whose witness has brought illumination, vitality, and or challenge in some cases to our collective spiritual journey. Today, we're looking at Saint Teresa of Avila.
And give me just one moment. I'll pull that up. Teresa of Avila was born on the 28th of March, 1515. She passed on the 15th of October, 1582. She was also called Saint Teresa of Jesus. She was a Spanish noblewoman and was called to convent life in the Catholic Church. A Carmelite nun, prominent Spanish mystic, religious reformer, author, theologian of the contemplative life and of mental prayer, she earned the rare distinction of being declared a doctor of the Church. Active during the Catholic Reformation, she reformed Carmelite orders of both women and men. The movement she initiated was later joined by the younger Spanish Carmelite friar and mystic John of the Cross. It led eventually to the establishment of the Discalced Carmelites. A formal papal decree adopting the split from the old order was issued in 1580. Teresa, who had been a social celebrity in her home province, was dogged by early family losses and ill health. In her mature years, she became the central figure of a movement of spiritual and monastic renewal born out of inner conviction and honed by aesthetic practice. She was also at the center of deep ecclesiastical controversy as she took on the pervasive laxity in her order against the background of Protestant Reformation sweeping over Europe and the Spanish Inquisition asserting church discipline in her home country. The consequences were to last well beyond her own life. One papal legate described her as a restless wanderer, disobedient, and stubborn feminina, who, under the title of devotion, invented bad doctrines, moving outside the cloister against the rules of the Council of Trent and her prelates, teaching as a master against Paul's orders that women should not teach. Her written contributions, which include her autobiography, The Life of Teresa of Jesus, and her seminal work, The Interior Castle, are today an integral part of Spanish Renaissance literature. Together, The Way of Perfection, her works, form part of the literary canon of Christian mysticism and Christian meditation practice, and continue to attract interest from people both within and outside the Catholic Church. Other associations with Teresa, beyond her writings, continue to exert wide influence. A Santero image of Immaculate Conception of El Viejo, said to have been sent by her with a brother immigrating to Peru, was canonically crowned by Pope John Paul II on December 28, 1989, at the shrine of El Viejo in Nicaragua. Another Catholic tradition holds that Teresa is personally associated with the devotion to the infant Jesus of Prague, a statue she may have owned. Since her death, her reputation has grown, leading to multiple portrayals. She continues to be widely noted as an inspiration to philosophers, theologians, historians, neurologists, fiction writers, psychologists, artists, as well as to countless ordinary people interested in Christian spirituality and mysticism. 40 years after her death, in 1622, Teresa was canonized by Pope Gregory XV At the time, she was considered a candidate for the nation patron saint of Spain, but this designation was awarded to James the Great. She has since become one of the patron saints of Spain. On September 27, 1970, Pope Paul XI proclaimed Teresa the first female doctor of the Church in recognition of her centuries-long spiritual legacy to Catholicism.
Thank you. And now we'll share the video. This is Tasha Layton. If you are watching on Facebook Live, you may need to click on the link to watch with us. Hopefully the rest of us can see it. The title of the song is Look What You've Done. And this is the time that we would share any news, joys, and concerns. If you are on Facebook Live or watching on our webpage streaming, then you'll need to type something in the chat section. Give us a message, and we will repeat that for those who are present. Those who are here, if you have something to share with us, raise a hand and we'll get a microphone to you. And if you're on Zoom, you may unmute yourself and we will hear you.
Bob, this is Becky.
Hey, Becky.
I have three people I'd like for y'all to keep in your prayers. One is Mary Helen. She was a schoolmate of mine, and cousin Sherry, and a friend of my best friend, her brother Dwayne. They all three have cancer, and it's fast growing, and they really need prayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. We certainly will. Anyone else?
No, it's also Mary Jane's anniversary. Sarah Jane, sorry.
And
This
happy
week.
anniversary. We have a comment on the website, I believe.
Okay, Sydney has said, when I could no longer work and had to wait for disability, I went from unemployment to disability. I look back and see how unwittingly faithful I was.
Okay. All right.
Growth, because it helps me with now when I have no control.
Thank you. That's a joy. Thank you for sharing that, Sydney. Anyone else? Bob Johnson has a prayer concern that he wants to keep private, but ask us if we would remember his family and him at this time. And of course, we continue to pray for our world situation, especially for the folks in Ukraine and the families that are being dispersed from there as well.
Bob, I want to put my dad on the prayer list. He just turned 79, and he has got a major urinary tract infection, which is causing a lot of issues. And then he has been falling a lot here lately. And he actually made mention to my daughter that he was concerned about his own driving now. So he's realizing things are taking a turn.
Right.
So
right.
just pray for him.
Virgil. Thank you, Daniel. Your dad, of Virgil. Anyone else? Let's pray together. Pastor G, would you lead our prayer, please?
Sure. Creator, the prayer concerns spoken this morning are on our hearts and minds. We ask that you be with those individuals who are spoken of and their family. Give them strength and courage and a sense of peace through the uncertainty and anxiety that comes with health concerns. We also ask that you be with those unspoken prayers this morning, the private prayer concerns, and in turn be with them, Lord, in the way only you can be. We ask that you bring peace to this world where it seems impossible. We ask that you stop the carnage that's taking place in the Ukraine, that's spreading into other countries. Lead and guide us as followers of Christ in ways that we can impact and stop evil where it shows itself. Lastly, O Creator, open our hearts and minds to the message this morning so that it gives us hope, so that it removes chains of anxiety, fear, shame, guilt that every one of us have encountered, so that we enter into this, the first day of spring, is a new beginning with hope, and joy, and laughter. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
And thank you for remembering this being the first day of spring. Happy spring to everyone. I invite you now to say our affirmation of oneness with us. If you are where you can see our words, this reminds us of who we are and what we stand for. Let's say it together. We gather in oneness together. We praise and worship God together. We proclaim God together. We welcome and affirm all persons in God's love together. And we seek to live for God with every breath and every heartbeat together. If you are not on our contact list, I would invite you to join it. Please text the word ADD to 270-201-5022. You'll get a form where you can give us your name and any other information that you'd like to give us. But if you'll send the text ADD to 270-201-5022, it will capture your phone number and you'll be added to our contact list. Every Sunday morning about 8:40, you'll receive a text with the topic for the day and a link to Zoom where you can just click and join us that way. We encourage you to do so. And we're at the point where we talk about our tithes and offerings in the service, and I do not like to be that kind of pastor that talks about money. We don't want to be that kind of church that talks about money all the time. We don't want to put any pressure on anyone. But the truth is, we are facing some dire times financially as a church. We talked a little bit about that last week and some hard decisions that we might have to make about whether or not we even hang on to this building. We sent out a congregational letter from the executive board last week, and that's been widely circulated. If you haven't seen it, you can find that on our Facebook page. But people have responded very positively. We've gotten donations from folks that are local as well as from far away. In this past week, people are responding and saying, the message I'm getting is that we want you here, we need you here, we're glad that your church is here in our community and doing the work that you do. So I praise God for that, and I ask that you continue to give if you can. If you don't have the resources, that's okay. We're not asking anyone to go to the poorhouse in order to help us. It's tough times for everyone. But if you do, if you have a little extra, if you can dig a little deeper, if you can make your donation monthly or weekly donation so that it is a sustaining gift to our church, that would be greatly appreciated. Let me say something to those of you who don't have the finances in particular. There are other ways that you can help us. One of the things that you can do is interact with us on our Facebook page, comment, like it, share it with others. Do not underestimate the impact that can have in getting the word out and letting other people know about us. One of the ways that we make this church more sustainable is by growing our base. And every time you do that, it lets people know about us. So please help us out if you possibly can. And thank you for those of you who have already responded. Thank you in advance for those who are yet to respond to our needs. Thank you so very much. I want to move on with another video this morning. This one is Blanca. The title of the music is The Healing. So we are in about midway through our series for Lent called Giving Up Religion for Lent. Lent is often marked by many people by giving up something, meat, chocolate, maybe Facebook. It actually started as a time of preparation for baptism, which followed Ash Wednesday on Easter. And the ash implies that something is gone. The ash that is used on Ash Wednesday is last year's palms. And so our current series is called Giving Up Religion for Lent. And neither Jesus nor the Old Testament prophets were very big fans of religious externals. The prophets declared that God actually despised their feasts and sacrifices, all the trappings of religion. Jesus said that we must go beyond the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees who kept the law, but following the letter of the law is not enough. Doing all the do's and avoiding all the don'ts is not enough, because it's not about the rules. It's not about religious externals, but about relational internals. It's not about rules, but the intent of the rules. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are giving up on religion altogether. The nones, that's N-O-N-E-S, are the fastest growing segment of religious preference. People who identify with no denomination at all. And they now account for 26% of Americans polled in 2020. And that's a higher percentage than any other single denomination. You see, the church has lost its once mostly positive image in society. David Kinnaman, in his book Unchristian, writes, "Outsiders believe Christians do not like them because of what they do, how they look, or what they believe. They feel minimized, or worse, demonized by those who love Jesus." In other words, people look at the church today and they consider Christians to be very, unchristian. And because of that, they don't believe that the church has anything much to offer them. They've concluded that the church is anti-homosexual, old-fashioned, outdated, judgmental, critical, boring, out of touch, hypocritical, insensitive, and unwelcoming. And they ain't very wrong. Now, don't misunderstand me. Not everyone who's dropping out of church has abandoned the faith. Some report that they're quitting church in order to preserve their faith. What I call leaving the church for all the right reasons. people are wanting to distance themselves. And even those who stay in the church are hesitant to use the label Christian, like me, for instance. There's just too much baggage associated with that word. Lenny Bruce wrote, "Every day people are staying away from church and going back to God." You see, God doesn't care about rituals, traditions, practices. God cares about how you treat each other. God doesn't care about our churches or our religions. God cares about how you live your life. God doesn't care about the show. God cares about what's in your heart. Doesn't care about the baggage. God cares about your spirit. Our focal passage for today is also from the Gospel of Matthew. We're looking at passages throughout Matthew for this whole series. This time, Matthew chapter 12, verses 1 through 14. Pastor G has that reading.
At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was not lawful for him or his companions to eat, but only for the priest. Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and yet are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." He left that place and entered their synagogue. A man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, "Is it lawful to cure on the Sabbath?" so that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Suppose one of you has only one sheep, and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will you not lay hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a human being than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and it was restored, as sound as the other. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him.
Getting upset because someone was healed sounds silly to me. We're talking about scrapping the Sabbath silliness today. Throughout the whole series, we've been talking about ditching the trappings of religion without losing what is essential to faith. We've looked at several passages in Matthew to kind of get at this issue. The first Sunday of Lent, we talked about wine and wineskins, that you can't put new wine into old wineskins, just like you can't put new ideas into old mindsets. And you can't get new results with old behaviors. Last week we looked at faith through a well-known story about Jesus and Peter walking on the water, about not playing it safe and taking risks, stepping out of the boat. Today we're looking at that Sabbath story, actually two stories. The first one about Jesus and his disciples who are grazing on wheat, and the enforcers of the rules are right there to condemn that. Then there's a second story about a Sabbath healing, which, by the way, as I read the scriptures, must have been Jesus' favorite day for healing, because it seemed like he was healing on the Sabbath a lot. Again, the enforcers are there to make sure that no healings take place on Sabbath. Because, rules are rules, right? Even if they make no sense. One of my favorite things about Jesus is how he does whatever he wants. Doesn't really give a rip about how other people feel about it. Yeah, I kind of find that endearing about Jesus. And especially when he irritates the nice religious people. I guess secretly that's my favorite part about Jesus. The day that fourth grader Patrick Timoney took his favorite Lego to school ended badly. Because you know how dangerous those little suckers can be. Those tiny Lego guys. They hide in the couch and poke you when you sit down. They stab you in the foot as you walk across the floor. They single-handedly can destroy expensive things like vacuum cleaners and dishwashers and washing machines. And although no one was harmed that day, Patrick was expelled for endangering others. His favorite Lego toy was an 1.5-inch policeman figure who came armed with his own teeny tiny gun that didn't shoot anything. And that minuscule piece of plastic violated the zero tolerance policy of the school, which banned bringing any kind of weapons to school grounds. Fourth grader expelled for bringing a Lego policeman to school. Sometimes zero tolerance makes 0 sense. At least 0 common sense. And the Pharisees in our story today are zero tolerance kind of guys. They're all about it. Rules are rules. If the rule says no work on Sabbath, that means no work on Sabbath. But Jesus wasn't interested in keeping the Sabbath. Jesus was much more interested in incarnating the Sabbath, making Sabbath joy, Sabbath peace, Sabbath freedom, Sabbath compassion, a living, vital experience in the lives of his followers. I want to say 3 things about Sabbath this morning to kind of get at what hopefully we can gain from these stories. First, the Sabbath is about rest and relaxation. Jesus is saying to these scribes and Pharisees, you don't understand Sabbath at all. On another occasion, Jesus says, people were not made for Sabbath. Sabbath was made for people. Remember that keeping the Sabbath was one of the 10 commandments. And these were rules that, well, I really don't like to think of them as rules. I like to think of them more as rights, kind of like a Bill of Rights is to the Constitution. These rights were given to people who were coming out of slavery. It declared that people were entitled, a right, to a day off. And it was the law in order to ensure that it happened. It even guaranteed that animals got a day off. Sabbath was for relaxing, not rules. But you know how people are. People love their rules. Even when they're not really rules, but extensions of the rules. Back then there was a very long list of rules for the Sabbath. The Talmud, which took the law and expanded it to explain it further what it really, how it really should be followed. It's an ancient collection of those Jewish teachings. And it had a whole section that was devoted to prohibited acts on the Sabbath. And they were collected in 39 different classifications. 39 whole different classifications about rules that were prohibited on the Sabbath. As the disciples and Jesus walked through that cornfield and harvested, if you want to call it that, took a few grains of wheat from the field as they walked, which was allowed on any other day but Sabbath, they broke 4 of the rules. But Jesus always favored people over parameters. We're bad about having rules and parameters as well. The church is really bad about this because we're people and people like rules, you know? And so we make up all kinds of rules about who can be healed and when they can be healed, who can take communion and who cannot, who can be ordained, who cannot, who's okay, who's not okay, what kind of clothes you can wear. Can you think of parameters that get in the way of people, that get in the way of letting people be their best selves? I'm opening it up right now for you to participate. What are some parameters you can think of? Some rules, some regulations, some expectations. Sometimes it's not written rules, but just expectations, unwritten rules that we have. What are parameters that are put ahead of people that you can think of? Anyone? If you're here, I'll get a microphone to you. If you're on Zoom, you can unmute. And if you're joining us either on web page or on Facebook Live, please type something in. We'll read it.
Bob, I think one thing that's put ahead of people is the idea that theology is not to be questioned. And you have so many individuals with so many different journeys, and they're not allowed to question anything. And therefore, they become secondary to, if you will, the rules. And to even suggest questioning something or questioning where God is considered evil. So that's one example that comes to my mind. Becky said, I was raised to not break rules. I was an easy target for self-righteous churches. It took me until I was 60 years old. I ran a red light on purpose so that I could see that I wouldn't die if I broke a rule. I made sure I was alone on both streets. I can think differently about rules and what is best for me.
Oh, what a great story. Thank you. Isn't it interesting that Jesus, who answered questions with other questions, that we who follow Jesus think that questions are not okay? Sometimes. Others. What are some other silliness that you can think of? Just 1 second, Roy.
I had a lady tell me one time in tithing, she says, "Oh, I always tithe." She says, if I don't, so God will take it somewhere or the other. You know, it couldn't happen to me, and he ended up taking it. You know, so he's not a make you do things. You know, it's if you can do things. You know, and some people, especially the older ones like me, that was raised up that you give 10%. And if you can't do it, well, then they think you're sinning or something.
Yeah, tithing is one of those. It's a rule, but Jesus cared about poor people. I don't think Jesus would get out of sorts if poor people didn't give their 10%. In fact, Jesus was one of the reasons that Jesus got so angry at the temple when they were exchanging money is because they were exploiting poor, and it angered Jesus that the church was doing that. So we can take something that's a good thing. Keeping the Sabbath is not a bad thing, but keeping the Sabbath, if it gets in the way of people, if it keeps you from healing on the Sabbath, if it keeps you from eating something when you're hungry, then the rules get in the way. And Jesus is just like, chill, people, when he's talking to the Pharisees. Just chill. He didn't care much for all of their rules. Even seemed to take some pleasure, I think, in breaking them. I don't know about you, but I'm happy to have a space like this church, where we have some pretty loosey-goosey parameters about who has access to what, and where we can relax into God's grace. Catholic theologian James Allison talks about how much of the church thinks that faith is about such things like striving and keeping the rules, calling people out for not having it right, spiritual practices, doctrinal purity, whatever. But he says faith is really about relaxing. Relaxing, he says, in the same way that you do when you're with a friend that you know cares about you. Where you no longer have to strive and work hard at being with them. You just relax, and somehow you become your very best self. Funny, spontaneous, and free. Allison suggests that faith is trusting that God is so much fond of us that we just freaking relax. Sabbath is about relaxation and rest, but it's also about restoration. The second story was not after the disciples had walked through the wheat field and took a few grains of wheat. Then there's this follow-up story that Matthew puts right after it about a healing of a man with a withered hand. And it makes that part of the Matthew's collection of these two stories makes it clear that it's also about restoration and not just relaxation. Now, a withered hand is not life-threatening. That's how I know that this story is about restoration, because there was nothing life-threatening about having a withered hand. However, it was a disability that led to his exclusion in the community. And know this: people in Jesus' day looked down upon anybody that was different in the same way that people look down on anybody that's different today. And if that differentness happens to be a physical disability or a mental disability or something like that, understand that it's still all about exclusion. And know this also: healthcare in Jesus' day, just like in our day, really kind of depended upon your economic status. We call it a healthcare system, but it's really kind of a wealth care system. If you have wealth, you get the care. If you don't have wealth, you're also often left out in the cold. So healing was something that was good news to those who were poor. Healing was something that was good news to the poor. And healing brought with it restoration to the community. The thing that was keeping this man barred or excluded from community was his withered hand. Take the withered hand away, and all of a sudden there's nothing to look down upon him for. Community is restored. The church in Jesus' day, as in today, is real good about denying grace and community to people who don't fit into the box, valuing the parameters rather than the people. But God doesn't fit into anyone's box. God doesn't like boxes, no matter how beautiful they may be. And grace is not an economic category. There is no limited supply of grace. Sabbath is about rest. Sabbath is about restoration. Finally, Sabbath is about resistance. Jesus shows us that Sabbath is about resisting the rules that don't make sense. We call it civil disobedience today, which is all about resisting the rules that are unjust. They don't make sense. Rules that are unjust, rules that don't make sense, are rules that should be broken. What John Lewis calls making good trouble. We not only have the right to resist in this country, but as Christians, we have a calling to resist. One commentator had this to say about the church today. The church has become wussified. We used to be about great and mighty things, healing, bringing the rich and the poor together, bringing light into the darkness, making the dead alive. The Church of Jesus Christ used to make waves. Now we don't even make a splash. But Jesus didn't just make waves, Jesus made a tsunami. Now we're wusses, mealy-mouthed, namby-pamby crybabies who whine and wheeze about every cut and scrape or scratch and patch the culture gives us. He doesn't mince words, does he? Church, it's time that we become unwussified. It's time we break a few rules. It's about time that we stand up for what is right, what is just, not what is legal. And right here in the midst of the hypocrites and the religious legalists of Jesus' day, this is where God shows up and does God's thing, whether or not it's within the law or not. Amen. I invite your reaction, comments, questions, your observations, how this teaching today has impacted you, or what questions it's raised for you. What have you learned today? Your turn.
I guess, Bob, for me, I don't know about other people, but there's sometimes I wished the gospel writers would have added more to what Jesus said. For example, healing the man with the withered hand. You spoke about that being a pivotal part in his being accepted into the Jewish society and even the temple. And I would have loved for Jesus to have said, I healed him for his wholeness, not to get him into your club. That's not why I healed him. I healed him for his own well-being. He doesn't need to have a well hand to be close to God. So I felt that in your preaching, though, But I would have loved for a few of these stories to go a little deeper so Jesus delineates, why am I healing a blind man? Why am I healing somebody who's deaf and mute? Has nothing to do with their sins, has nothing to do with me proving anything to any of you or bringing them closer to God. I feel like there's so much ambiguity left at the end of that statement that unfortunately some fundamentalist churches take it and run with it.
Yeah, we're going to take whatever we want to take and run with it just about any time we want. And though it's not in this particular story, there are some of the stories that are recorded where it becomes kind of clear, such as the healing of the leper, where Jesus commands him, now go and show yourself to the authorities, which was all about gaining access back to the temple. He would have been excluded completely until he showed himself that he was clean again, and then would have been restored to community. But yeah, I think the reason that they didn't, Pastor G, is because everyone understood that back then, that those things would have kept you from being a part of the community. But we're 2,000 years removed from that. It's not as understood today as it used to be when those were written, perhaps. Other comments or questions?
Becky said, I love being free to think for myself and to be able to run red lights. Now, I added the red lights piece. She's just thankful for being able to think freely.
It is freeing, and that's what Jesus was about, isn't it? Yes. Thank you.
And Stephanie says she reminds me of people with disabilities. And tomorrow's World Down Syndrome Day. Liz has not always been welcome at churches, and by people here she is welcome, and thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else? Comment, question, observation? This is your turn to preach. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Glad that you have been a part of this community. We may be spread out all over the world, but it is so good to be in community with each of you. Please help us to create more community with each other. We really want this to be a place where we connect and not just sit on the sidelines and watch something for entertainment or even edification. We want this to be a connection that goes back and forth. So please participate with us in the future. Thank you for those of you who have today participated. And please come back and join us next week when we're going to talk about the wheat and the weeds. God bless you.